And I think that people forget that. And I know that it was certainly a struggle for me to not feel completely self-conscious as I first started talking, talking to the camera. As you talk to the camera, you're like, oh my goodness, who even cares? And so can you talk a little bit about that, about just that process of going from Joe Rogan of Fear Factor to Joe Rogan, now the media mogul?
Yeah. So, I mean, you make a great point, which is that we all suck when we start.
I guess that's we all suck when we start.
We all suck when we start things, right? And I'm not saying that you can't be naturally good at something. I'm saying you suck compared to how good you could be, right? Like, none of us ever starts at full, like, capacity ability. That's just not how skills work, right? The more you develop them, the better you are at deploying them.
Hey, welcome to Networking Star. I am your host, Jeffery Boyle, and here we interview some of the most innovative, interesting, and just cool people that inspire us. Today, I have one of those really cool, inspirational people, Maayan Gordon. So she has all kinds of different titles. And so as we went through, what's the best way to represent her? Well, she has over 1 billion views on social media. She has over 2.3 million followers on one of her accounts. She's a marketing communications consultant, a speaker, an author, an artist, and she just does all kinds of different things to help people be happy and to be able to really improve their brand. Maayan, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. So we met online, we met on LinkedIn, and so you did an experiment. That's how I guess you explained it. You did an experiment, and all of a sudden you had 2.3 million followers and billions of views. That's quite an experiment.
Yeah, I think it stems from my upbringing, being from, scientist parents. So both my parents, work at the University of Washington in Seattle. And so to me, all of it's an experiment, right? Like, this whole life thing is a big experiment to me. So, I started posting on TikTok back in 2019, and I had no idea how the app worked. It took me like a week to figure out how to post a video on there. So I started out just like anyone who's watching this, in the phase of just trying to figure out a new piece of technology. Then I figured out how to post a video, and I was like, okay, let's keep posting and we'll see what happens. That was where I started out from. And then 2 weeks in, one of the videos just took off. So I woke up one morning and there was the 99 plus notifications, and I was like, 99, that's like a lot of notifications for only having, 2,000 followers on my account. So I open it up and it's way more than 99. I mean, it's like scrolling actively, new comments, new follows, new likes are coming in second by second. And so then I was like, what the heck is going on? And that's when it turned into an experiment, because I was trying to figure out, what was going on and how this app was even functioning. And the only way that I know how to go about discovering things is, well, one, Google search. At the time, Google didn't really have any valuable info on TikTok back in 2019. And so I was like, I gotta just figure out what's going on here. So I designed a bunch of experiments to test out some different hypotheses I had, and some of them worked really, really well.
Obviously worked extremely well. We moved back from Costa Rica, and it's really interesting because I didn't use TikTok to any real degree. But in, outside the United States, a lot of adults use TikTok and not just the millennials. And I know millennials are adults now. But it was really interesting that that was the best way to communicate with the Costa Ricans. And they really are amazing people. And if you put something, for example, as a foreigner, I speak Spanish. So if I'd speak Spanish, they would just blow up the different things. But that experiment, of course, once I moved to the United States and now I can tag myself to the United States, none of them care so much about it anymore, which wasn't my audience. But it is crazy how each of the different platforms have their own life. And even as you mentioned, the Facebook page that we have, the number of people that we have on there, it's not easy to get what do you tell people? Because as a scientist background, as a brand manager, how do you help people get to the levels that they want to be?
Yeah, to me, it comes back to something that is just deeply shared across all human beings, which is it's got to be fun.
Yeah.
Like we're here to enjoy, our lives and have a good time. And I think the reason any scientist is a scientist is because they enjoy doing science. It's a fun game for them to play. So for anyone who is looking to accomplish anything on social media, like my biggest piece of advice is turn it into a game for yourself. Like make it fun, and almost guaranteed you will be successful, because the real barrier is how long can you do something while still looking at it to improve it. Because obviously if you're doing the same exact thing over and over again and it's not getting results, that's the definition of insanity, is to not try changing something. But if you're willing to just keep playing the game and make little tweaks here and there, at some point it's very likely you will have some type of mega success. And that's really what happened with me. I was on Instagram for 8-9 years, posting every single day. And then one day on TikTok, it just, totally took off for me. And while that was, technically literally happened overnight, it was 9 years of playing the game before I had that opportunity for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is you're right, is that what is your endurance to be able to do it? Yes. And while I refer to Costa Rica, maybe because it's such a wonderful experience for me, especially my family, to be there. But I was taking every Instagram course I could. I've put out, my company, we'd put out beautiful, very beautiful videos for a long time, corporate style videos. And that's not what's popular on Instagram. So all of a sudden I found myself trying to learn how to do it. I took course after course after course. And then you hear stories of guys like Alex Hormozi that have millions of views, and he got his YouTube video to this. But what you forget is that Alex Hormozi, toiled in anonymity for years before all of a sudden it exploded. And it gets very frustrating. One of the courses I took cost $1,000, Founders Instagram Domination. I remember just ticking off every possible one of those boxes and still nothing. And then one day, all of a sudden, the same thing, and you look at it and all these likes and all these followers, and you're like, wow, how did that happen? And you're right. I think too little of us, too few of us have the ability just to keep trying and experimenting and then feeling good about what you're doing and getting those results.
Yeah, I think, the feeling good part is so much more important than, we give it the space to even talk about in conversations. And it's something we all intuitively, it's a duh thing, right? Like, obviously you're going to perform better and for longer when you feel good about the work that you're doing. And so, I think for most people, it's just the mindset, like a mindset shift of this isn't work. I mean, is it work? Yes. But if you think about it not as work and as something else that is more enjoyable than your concept of work, because a lot of people, they just struggle with the concept of work, right? Yeah. When they hear that word, they have a bad feeling about work. For me, I've worked quite a number of years to remove that negative connotation from the word work. And so, for a lot of people, that's the problem, not really anything else, is they have to figure out how to make work fun again for them. Like the concept of fun.
And I think you're right. I think work is, to me, it's never been a dirty word, but it really is, I think, to a lot of people. And it does take work. And any one of these people online that you listen to when if they're doing any kind of course, or if you listen to them give a talk or in a panel where people ask them, they'll all tell you how much work it is. Last night, my wife and I, as we were, falling asleep, we always try to find something dumb to watch to put us to sleep. And I found the first episode of Fear Factor. with Joe
Wow, with
Rogan.
the young Joe
Oh
Rogan.
my
Oh, that's
goodness. That's
fun.
when Joe had all his hair, so I related to that. I was like, wow, Joe. It was so bad. It was so bad. I was expecting it to be so done. And when my wife said to me, goes, you know what this feels like? This feels like somebody just picked up a camera and followed him around. The audio was bad, the video was bad, the stunts weren't very good. Joe was over. You listen to him now and he feels so natural. And you look at the first videos that he put out on YouTube, they were just a couple dudes sitting around just talking, right? And I think that people forget that. And I know that it was certainly a struggle for me to not feel completely self-conscious as I first started talking, talking to the camera. As you talk to the camera, you're like, oh my goodness, who even cares? And so can you talk a little bit about that, about just that process of going from Joe Rogan, a fear factor, to Joe Rogan, now the media mogul?
Yeah, so I mean, you make a great point, which is that we all suck when we start. Like,
I guess that's what we all suck when we
we
start.
all
Right?
suck when we start things, right? And I'm not saying that you can't be naturally good at something. I'm saying you suck compared to how good you could be, right? Like, none of us ever starts at full, like, capacity ability. That's just not how skills work, right? The more you develop them, the better you are at deploying them.
Well, I think you're saying exactly what so many of the people are just dominating online. You can tell some of the people I listen to a lot just by some of the examples, but Alex Hermosi, who dominates across Twitter, across Instagram, across YouTube, across all these different channels. It's crazy how he can dominate. Same thing with Gary Vaynerchuk. And there's so many different people that have been able to, not so many, so few people that have been able to do this. Both Gary V and Alex Hermosi were really terrible when they started. Joe Rogan just is an icon, and he was terrible. Not just bad, he was terrible. But Alex Hermosi, I think, said it the best when he said that in the beginning, quantity is more important than quality. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you're putting out quality quantity. And you think, wow, does that make sense? Yeah. In the beginning, just getting out there, you're never going to get good without doing a certain amount of quantity before that quality comes.
I mean, it's just like any sport or exercising, right? It's a certain number of reps that gets you to a certain point. And obviously time's a factor, but if you can do those reps in a shorter amount of time, it's not a 10-year to master a skill. It's a 10,000 reps to master this skill. And obviously it's different for each person. And what takes one person 1 year might take you 10 years, vice versa. But yeah, it's really, about quantity having its own quality as well. So when I was in my glass blowing business, I did a massive amount of quantity of making glass art pieces. And I had the same kind of strategy with, developing an art skill as I do with, developing skills on social media, which is I determined the thing I could make the fastest. And I just made as many of those as I possibly could, because what I really needed to develop was kind of like my finger dexterity. It wasn't I needed to develop an eye for art. My hands literally needed to learn a new way of connecting with my brain and hand-eye coordination. And that just takes a certain amount of doing it over and over and over again. But because I did it, full blast and could get the repetition in, I was able to develop my skill much more quickly than my husband. He wanted to make really big fancy pieces. And so he, could only make a piece once every 2 or 3 hours. And, half the time it would crack because he was still learning the skill set. And so he really did not develop his skills nearly as quickly as I did, simply because I was actually making something simpler, but I was doing it more consistently, more often, with more repetition.
What you're saying is very similar to what Chet Holmes said as it relates. He has a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. He passed away from cancer a few years ago. But one of the things he always talked about, being an expert on something is not doing 4,000 things well. It's a matter of doing a few things 4,000 times. And I think that that's kind of what you're talking about is really honing in and becoming an expert. And he calls it pig-headed discipline, is really having pig-headed discipline on those, I guess, needle moving things that are going to help you get to the next level. You have had, there of course on social media there's some luck, but you can't achieve the different numbers that you've achieved without there being consistency and skill. On your page and in some of your stories, you talk about a life-altering event. Will you explain that a little bit about how a life-altering event in your childhood completely changed your perspective on how you do things now?
Yeah. So, are you talking about? I feel like many life-altering events, but
You said
when
a gas explosion.
Yes.
That I guess I should have a gas explosion life altering.
That's what you meant. Yeah. So, when you're growing up, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that your world is not the whole world.
Right.
And so I just, came from a place where my awareness was just, a much smaller circle of awareness. And also, hadn't made, I would say, clear life choices. Partially because, how many life choices do you get to make when you're living at home, right? But
about two. You get to make two when you get up and when you get.
And so, there's no certificate when you become an adult where they are like, hey, you made it. Here are all the things you have to do now on your own. And here are the new ways you should think now as an adult that you never had to think before. And so I was just stuck in the same, mindset and, mental place that I was from growing up. Because there wasn't something that prompted me to think, oh, things are different now. Maybe I should have a little powwow with myself and figure out what life's going to look like in this, new phase. And then I was in this gas explosion, which was completely, obviously unexpected, was really traumatic, and ended up being, I think one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, because it was a huge, just literal wake up call, right? The same way that, when you're sleeping and you hear, your hotel's phone call, wake up call, and it shocks you awake, yeah. Right? Oh my God. That's literally what happened psychologically to me. When I was in this gas explosion, I went, oh my God, I was just asleep for my whole life, but now I'm awake. What do I do with this? And I mean, that's a hard, scary thing for, I think, any person to go through, to realize that, they hadn't really been making choices in a lot of areas, and that now they were going to have to make those choices, really intentionally instead of passively letting them happen. But I think that's where, all the good things, all the success for me has come from really that moment of waking up.
I don't think there's any question to be able to take something so positive from something so negative, because it impacted your family significantly, according to what you wrote online. Do you think that the success and the different things that you've done that have been successful have to do with the fact that you're a glass half full rather than a glass half empty? Because that could have been the kind of thing that would send certain people on a downward spiral. How do you view yourself and your attitude based upon the way that you've reacted positively to things like that in your life?
Yeah, so I would say, my nature is to downward spiral. And I mean, that's what I did, my whole childhood. I had, really bad anxiety, really struggled, with my mental health and just being stressed out and, negative self-esteem and self-image. And so I built a really strong, just brain pattern of when something bad happened externally, then, all the negative self-talk and all of the negative feelings happening, and making it worse and worse. And so, after that explosion, I don't think I felt good for probably months after that. I just felt bad all the time. Depressed, not good about myself, not good about my life, just generally, not as spirally downward, but swirling just in the same kind of negative
Right.
space. But because I had made this commitment to like deal with things instead of trying to run away from it, that was the basic choice that I made that fundamentally changed every decision I would make thereafter. Was just that I was going to face the hard things instead of trying to run away from them. And so as I started facing, that first big thing, which was not only this life event, but really what the explosion was emotionally, was looking at my entire childhood and saying, okay, man, there's a lot there that I gotta deal with and like, feel better about and become okay with. And ever since then, it's gotten easier and easier. Now, I will say the first, 6-7 years were a real struggle, even just to not be going more and more negative in my kind of natural brain pattern. But now all the way to a point where my automatic natural response is positive. So I don't know that anyone is stuck in one way or the other. Like, I think we all have the ability to change from a glass half full to a glass half empty person and vice versa. So for me, it was just about believing that that's even true, right? Because there was a long time where I didn't not believe, but also didn't believe like people could change fundamentally, right? That like who you were born is kind of who you're going to be, and you're going to have these flaws that are always with you, and you're going to have these strengths that are always with you. And first I had to say, do I really believe that? Or do I think that that's not true? And I've always had just a fundamental belief that people can change, like at the deepest core levels of who they are. And I think I probably believe that because I've heard way too many stories from people who've gone through massive transitions to not believe that. Like there's evidence to me that that's true. And so for me, it was just, how do I become that person? How do I become a person who something bad happens and I don't feel bad and I see good things? Could that even make the bad thing not as bad? And for me, the answer is very much yes. So it's a almost self-fulfilling prophecy strategy all in one, where if I look at things from a positive light, then they feel better, which means they are more positive than if I, thought about them in a negative light. So our experience and our perception, I think, really are within our control very, very largely.
Well, I always like to ask people, because you've talked about your ability to, I do believe that you have the ability to fundamentally change your attitude. And I also believe that we have times where we fundamentally lose that from some kind of betrayal, some type of hardship, some type of something where, sometimes it takes a while to recover from some of those and to get a different perspective. But I also like to ask, my guests, because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, what do you tell that brand new entrepreneur or even a stuck, experienced entrepreneur? How do you go from being stuck to taking your business or your attitude to the next level?
I think it's finding, your crew. So not necessarily, like finding your tribe is what marketers will say to like how you grow an audience. I mean, find like your team who is going to support you, the entrepreneur, the business owner, and like help you be successful. So kind of like, there's an analogy people will use about top level sports athletes, right? Like the rookie's not just going out on the field all by himself. He's got a trainer, he's got like a physical therapist, he's got a nutritionist, right? And so I think it's not something that's taught to, most entrepreneurs, is like, hey, one of the most fundamental things that's going to contribute to your success is having a team. I think partially that's because when you talk about team in entrepreneurship, usually it's your employees. And I'm not talking about employees. I'm talking about other people who support you. And sometimes, you're going to have to find a like local organization that helps foster those connections. So there might be some type of like business incubator that, wants to help you succeed and connect you with those people. Sometimes you're just going to have to find them. And a lot of people are like, but how? How do you find them? You just tell everyone what it is you're up to. People are like, Maayan, how did you find a company to sponsor a year-long road trip for you. It's like, well, I just told everyone I could talk to about what it is that I was doing and why I thought it was awesome and what I was looking for in terms of contribution. And lo and behold, one of the many, many people that I talked to went, oh, I know someone else who's done something similar. You should connect with them, right? It's always 2 or 3 steps further than you think it is, but that's it. It's only 2 or 3 steps. And so it's, that other analogy we all like to use, or the comic that I think a lot of people have seen, where top of the strip, there's a guy and he's digging a tunnel, underground, and he's like giving up at the end of the tunnel because he's been digging forever, and he's almost broken through, right? Versus the guy underneath, to like the gold and all the diamonds. And so I think, you're only 1 or 2 steps away from what you want, but it is going to be an extra 1 or 2 steps. It's not going to be 1 or 2 harder feelings or degrees of hardness. It's literally just an extra, message, it's just the 1 extra step. So I think, for anyone who's starting out, find a group of people, but then also just go 1 extra step. If you can go 1 step further than the other people you're competing with and the other people in your industry, then other people in general, that by itself will win you massive amounts of business.
I think you're right. There's oftentimes, Seth Godin in his book talks about a cul-de-sac, or when you should give up on a certain idea, but never give up on the dreams and goals that you're heading. The avenue may change, and even yesterday on one of the podcasts we recorded, someone talked about being shameless, really being proud of what you're trying to accomplish, and involving people and having mentors and having people that will speak truth to you, but also having people that will buoy you up. That is completely invaluable. Maayan, please tell everybody where to find you.
Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is maayangordonmedia.com. And I've got like a bunch more of my life stories and everything on there. And then if you want to connect with me and have a conversation, LinkedIn is definitely the best place to get in touch with me.
Well, that's where we met. Super great to have you here on Networking Star.
Absolutely. Thank you.